Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, The Role of Physical Access and Identity Management During the COVID-19 Pandemic, hosted by Security Industry Association. I'm Dr. Ellie Voorhees, Director of Education for SIA. SIA is the leading trade association for physical security technology businesses. We have more than 1,000 corporate members, including manufacturers, integrators, service providers, and others. We provide a variety of resources and services to our members, including many related to the business challenges created by the COVID-19 pandemic. They can be found on our website at securityindustry.org. Today, we are pleased to have speakers Jasveer Gill, CEO of AlertEnterprise, Jeff Nielsen, CTO of Brivo, and Sheldon Gabriel, CTO of Ai-tronics Systems. They will lead today's discussion on the role of physical access control systems in the safe and secure reopening of various types of facilities. Please remember that we will have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation, so go ahead and submit your questions into the sidebar at any point during the webinar. We will make this presentation and a link to the recording available on the SIA website. All webinar registrants will receive an emailed link to the recording. Now, to kick things off for us today, I would like to turn it over to our first presenter, Jasveer Gill.
Thank you, Ellie. Here's just to share with you before I go to the presentation that this idea came from our customers who were already from all different sectors like high tech, energy, oil and gas, chemical, healthcare, and all. And they said, can you help leverage your technology to also address COVID-19? So we'll share with you what we have done, the ideas from the customers. So my next slide shows the question that we had. So right when COVID-19 happened, the first thing they said, so Ellie, if you can go to the next slide, it shows the question they were asking. So like,
We're getting some feedback.
Okay. So they had a couple of key questions. One of the key questions was, how do we make sure when we bring up this workforce back, essential workers and others, how do we make sure they're safe? Secondly, once they're back in, let's say if somebody gets sick, how do we know who else was there when they got sick or for the last X days, which all facilities they went to, who else was there, because we might have to inform those people that they might have been exposed to the virus and so on. How do we really address privacy? So GDPR was a big deal because a lot of this information is confidential. And the beauty is that HR is also involved in this whole process. Since we work across HR and physical security, the COVID-19 Action Committee consists of HR and physical security. So they collectively asked us these questions. And the next slide actually shows what we were already doing for them. So we went back. So here is a slide. So if you look at our solution, not sure how much you know about AlertEnterprise, we are about automating the whole onboarding, offboarding process for a new employee, contractor, contingent worker when they join. How do you make sure that they have the right access? How do you make sure you are in compliance with various security and safety regulations? So this is what we were doing for them already. And they said, how about adding a few more controls? For example, now that we are going to bring back our workforce in, it's like somebody coming back from vacation, you activate the badge. But before you activate the badge, you want to make sure they're trained, certified, same way, are they healthy? So very simple additional check. How do you actively enforce those policies? Same way when people travel from one location to another location, we connect with the travel management system like Concur. So when people are going, let's say they're going to a sensitive area or they came from a sensitive area, how do you manage that? Same way, if somebody gets sick, how do you inform HR and physical security? So that was the idea that came from our customers. And the next slide shows the architecture that they came up with. So this is actually quite a complicated slide, not to share, hard to explain in this 10 minutes. But what they were basically looking for is prevention and detection and mitigation. Prevention is when people come back in. These could be your essential workers, these could be your employees, contractors, visitors. How do you make sure they're healthy? And this could be through certain self-attestation, or it could also be checking people's temperature through flare cameras or otherwise. And how do you take actions on those? secondly, from HR's perspective, how do you provide them the visibility? So that's what they were looking for. And as you can see, they wanted us to leverage all their investments in the HR system, in the physical access control system, and others. So that's what we did. And the next slide shows how they are actually implementing all of these COVID-19 policies. So the solution, basically, the slide that you see is how they have already implemented our solution. This example is for a very high-profile energy company. So these could be refineries, but these could be anything. These could be substations for utilities. These could be plants for other industries. These could be data centers for high-tech industries, and so on. So assets are obviously, who are the essential workers who are going there? If somebody's, just like we were doing before we implemented COVID-19, we were checking if somebody's training or certification expires, you should not be going into these sensitive areas because somebody could get hurt, people get, killed and all. So how do we apply the same kind of standards to now COVID-19? It's a very simple thing. So just like if somebody falls sick, you want to disable their access real time. You don't want to take chances where, let's say, somebody does it manually. Now you are, there's an opportunity for a lot of people to be exposed. So they wanted a real-time integration with our customers, like SuccessFactors is the HR system for this customer, where we have the real-time integration. We can immediately terminate somebody's access for certain reasons. So that's where you're not taking any chances. Same way from learning management system, we connect with them. We connect with a system like Fieldglass, which is used for contingent workers, temporary workforce. So that's what they're doing, and this is what is being implemented by all of our customers. And the next slide shows how we, these are the apps. So what we did very quickly, because we already had the platform, but customers were looking for, can you provide us apps from their smartphones, and this could be for anybody, visitors and employees and contractors, how they can quickly, give some information. This would be totally configurable, can be totally configurable, and how do you then take actions? And let's say if somebody falls sick, they actually inform their manager. They may not even come to the work. How can managers take action? How you can totally configure the workflow to have active policy enforcement? And on the right-hand side, how HR has the complete information of what is going on from visibility perspective and so on. The next slide is actually, in my view, that's the most interesting slide. This is where, like we said, people can always fall sick. Something people don't know. Now, let's say somebody has come in, they later on fell sick, tested positive. Customers are saying, show me where they have been in last X number of days. Who else was there? Who else they might have, met with and all, close to them. How do we take action on that? And you won't believe this is something that every customer is so interested in, because it's impossible to do it manually, because you're looking at information coming from HR, you're looking at information coming from physical security system, could be the camera systems and so on. And how do you do that in a way where you, because every industry is different, refineries, substations, plants, all of these different industries have different set of controls. So what they're doing is they're interested to implement what they call it industry content pack. If you have addressed these controls for a utility, one utility, how can we address it for all utilities or all oil and gas companies, all high-tech companies, all healthcare companies and all? So that's, I think, one of the latest things that all of our customers are implementing, and this is where we get the most value. And the next slide actually is the slide how they see this whole COVID-19, the path to safe and healthy workspace response. And this is actually more of our customer slide, sharing with their CFO, their CEO, the top executives, how we are addressing COVID-19. But to summarize what my presentation, I think when customers are looking at technology, they're saying manually it's impossible to do that. All the things that we talked about, they're overwhelming. So you don't want to rely on humans to act so fast. So that's where technology can really help customers address these things, because they're already leveraging their technology for what they call it compliance to different regulations, security, safety, and so on. And one of the things they're saying is active policy enforcement, how we can actively enforce these controls, because you don't want to be waiting for something to happen. How do you proactively do that? That is in a nutshell. That's what customers are doing. In the end, obviously, we will answer any questions. One of the things I didn't go into detail is the GDPR, and this is the last slide. So one of the things we are doing, our customers are actually hosting, they call it innovation days, COVID-19 innovation days for each industry. They're sharing their best practices. We would love to invite you. If any of you want details, we'll be happy to invite you to those innovation days. With that, I hand over to Jeff Nielsen from Brivo, who's also one of our great partners.
Thanks, Jasbir. I'm going to riff on some of the same themes that Jasbir brought up. As was mentioned, I'm the CTO at Brivo. We've been providing a cloud-based physical access control system dating back now 20 years or so. I'm getting lots of feedback. Is anyone else getting that?
All other presenters, please mute on their side. Thank you.
All right, perfect. Yeah, so as Jasbir mentioned, and as I'm sure part of the reason you're here is we're anticipating what office life especially might be like in a post COVID-19 world, and folks are trying to figure out what tools, what systems am I going to need to support new ways of entering buildings, new ways of exiting facilities, even new ways of interacting when I'm inside a facility. So I thought I would actually start with a couple of stories from some actual customers, as Jasbir did as well. So story number one, I was on a phone call mid-April or so with one of our dealers, an installer, and they had a client with Brivo installed in a 10-story building. This happened to be the company's headquarters, this large building. And they're trying to figure out, well, once people do come back to work, if hopefully they do come back to work, how are we going to better control access? And the idea, that at least their best idea to date at the point of our conversation, was to hire some extra security guards, equip them with thermal forehead scanners, and put them in the lobby, and a set of questions that everyone would have to answer before they could be allowed access into the building. So having to go through some sort of screening checkpoint. So that might work okay for a 10 to 50 person facility, but if you think of 10 floors worth of people, the logistical challenges of that quickly become apparent. So the question to us was, what sort of system do we need to manage that, logistically, so we can do it efficiently? And after talking with them for a little bit, we realized we could do a pretty straightforward modification to Brivo On Air, taking advantage of a feature that's built into our system and many other systems, which is the ability to suspend a user. And Jasbir mentioned some other ways you might automate that suspension of someone's access credentials. So when a user is suspended, their card won't work, their mobile credential won't work, can't get in. So in this case, what we decided to do was have an option, a feature where you could enable what we're calling personnel control, which basically suspends everybody's access at midnight in this case, and their credential can only be re-enabled by a guard swiping a card at a specific checkpoint device. You can imagine that they didn't want these security guards, in many cases temporary workers, to have admin access to the system in this case, but we're able to, with just some small modifications, allow for special readers or other kinds of devices to serve as this checkpoint device, so that security guards could quickly let folks into the building once they'd been scanned and answered the questions. So I share this story because it's a good example of my first point, which is that you probably don't need to rush out and invest in a bunch of new hardware and software to meet your post-COVID business needs. You can often repurpose your existing systems with just a little bit of creativity. This particular customer was able to achieve what they wanted to do business process-wise with literally no modification on their part, except for buying a couple of additional readers to serve as these checkpoint devices. So think about how you might repurpose systems you already have to adapt to your post-COVID business needs. Next story, if you would, Ellie, on the next slide. has to do with a different excuse me, feature with a pool of our customers that didn't want to take quite such a heavy-handed approach as literally suspending everybody every day, but they did want to responsibly ensure that employees were thinking before entering the office, that they were being reminded of the guidelines, and provide some degree of liability protection, that they had done a reasonable amount of screening before letting folks into the office. So Jasper mentioned this phrase as well, self-attestation. What we did in this case was add an option to Brivo's mobile pass, so the mobile phone credential, that before the pass works every morning, you have to you're presented with a splash screen, a blocking screen that asks you if you're complying with your federal, state, county, local guidelines in terms of contact with those that might have been infected, or if you've exhibited any symptoms yourself. Message itself is customizable, but the pass will not become enabled until the employee has basically made an attestation, a self-attestation, that they're practicing safe guidelines by entering the building. So how this gets used in practice is very flexible. You might want to customize the specific message that or the specific questions that are being asked. But again, it's an example of taking technology that's already there, in this case, a mobile credential, doing a little bit of brainstorming and repurposing in order to support a different protocol, a different set of business processes. Let's go to the next slide, Ellie. So take this one step further and think about a larger customer with some sort of identity management platform, maybe Okta or Active Directory, or even some of our SMBs like G Suite. Take that identity management system, use something like a Brivo Identity Connector to suck in all of those identities from your system of record and turn those into mobile credentials, and voila, you've got you're immediately equipped now with a mobile screening solution that can work for hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of users, and have all of those users with no extra personnel charge, no security guards, anything like that, attesting that they're symptom-free before entering your facility. So again, not rocket science, but a good example of, okay, let me hook up my Okta to my Brivo, and let me issue everybody mobile credentials, and that'll solve this particular problem. So again, look at ways you can repurpose the systems that you already have to meet these post-COVID needs. Another point I'd like to make that's illustrated by these two stories is that you ought to be working with an access control vendor that's responsive and able to turn around these kinds of things quickly. At Brivo, for example, we dedicated a 2-week development sprint for a couple of our teams to build these 2 features I mentioned, along with some other ones on this slide, an enhanced contact tracing report, some additional screening questions for our visitor management system. And we were able to put these out mid-May with just a very quick turnaround time, and they're in production today. What this COVID situation has either taught us or reminded us of is that the world does change in unpredictable ways, and you need to have vendors that you're working with that can respond quickly to those changes. So don't be afraid to ask your vendors, say, hey, it would be great if we just had this modification, or could you add this feature? Because if it's a feature you want, there's a good chance that somebody else wants that feature as well. So if you think about all these sort of mini adaptations together, a mobile self-attestation solution, a personnel control solution, an enhanced visitor reporting solution, this provides multitudes of ways or a 360 solution on all the different modes of entry that someone might have to your facility that you could mix and match, again, in ways that match your specific business needs. And then add in your IAM system. All these identities can be synchronized from your enterprise IAM system and give you a very scalable solution. So this would be the one exception, I guess, to my previous point of repurposing these systems you already have. That works great as long as you have a vendor that can support you and can turn things around quickly. If you don't, you might want to look for a different partner to work with, because again, world changes too quickly to have to wait around for features to take months or years to develop. And let me just finish my little section here with a shout out about cloud-based access control. Again, if situations prior to this didn't show the need for some sort of cloud-based management system, then hopefully the COVID situation makes that pretty clear, and for a couple of reasons that a cloud-based access management system is essential. One, we've already talked about the ability to quickly add new features, modify features, which you don't get in an on-premise system. Secondly, the need for remote management of these things is greater than ever. Our definition of what is unusual activity and what do I need to monitor for has suddenly broadened quite a bit in a post-COVID world. There's a whole new class of things I need to look out for. How many people are in the space, or which order, or what direction did they walk through the facility, things I might not have cared so much about before. So I'm being asked to monitor and manage all these things at the same time that I'm saying reduce the number of people physically there in the space. So if that isn't an ideal use case for cloud-based management, I don't know what is. And then finally, in a post-COVID world, you're going to need better information, better insights about what's actually working. Are there patterns that are actually successful at preventing the spread of infection? Are there patterns that are most successful about reducing risk? And those kind of questions are very hard to answer. At Brivo, for the last couple of years, we've been engaged in some machine learning type efforts where you can really, on a facility by facility basis, try to figure out what is unusual, what do I need to pay attention to, where's the proverbial needle in the haystack. And you're going to want access to that kind of analysis as you try to figure out, what are the right protocols in this new world. Very difficult if the only data you have to train a machine learning model on is your own data. At Brivo, we use all of our anonymized data from a multi-tenant system that processes millions of access events per day to try to feed into these models and figure out, what is it that we ought to be watching for now. So just to reiterate, you can often repurpose what the systems you've got, as long as you've got a vendor that is responsive, can turn around new features quickly, and as long as it's a some sort of cloud-based system, which is going to be essential, even more essential going forward. With that, I will turn things over to Sheldon.
Yes, thank you, Jeff. So pretty much what we offer here, of course, if you don't know too much about Ai-tronics systems, is that so we err on the side of being able to provide tools for the systems integrator to be able to deliver a bit more customized and a bit more flexible solutions out there. So pretty much we develop tools so that we make sure that the systems integrator, they're meeting the needs of the facility management, as well as, of course, the various different sorts of internal business development programs or business programs that, of course, have the needs for assets. And so, going back to just the basics of just why we, why we're actually just a part of this industry is basically, of course, so businesses, when they start from the beginning, of course they have assets, and of course they grow assets, and so that's why they have programs. So that's where, of course, everybody in the industry comes in. So if you go to the next slide, of course, obviously the world has completely changed from where it was at the beginning of the year. And so this then poses a challenge. So obviously, but previously before this, there was a question of course, being able to not only just provide the same sorts of governance and same sorts of tools that facility management, that your SOCs can use, but now we have to take into consideration and really start to be able to think a little bit differently in regards to how we can be able to probably have a bit more of environments that could be a little bit more safer, a little bit more healthier with regards to, really just trying to just figure out so how do we fit this in with some of the security work that, and as well as the access control work that we already do. So going over to the next slide. So obviously, this is definitely a no-brainer. So definitely software as a whole, really is eating the world. And if you go to the next slide, that would also include AI as well. So definitely, this is the approach that we definitely take with regards to basically making tools that abstract away some of the low-level bits of being able to provide more customized on-the-fly solutions. And so going over to the next slide. So pretty much, at least from what we've heard from some of our systems integration customers, and to a certain extent, some of our facility management customers, is that so the goal is to really be able to provide a bit more smart building type solutions to where you can be able to have these solutions that could easily integrate into whatever sorts of business division and business type programs that you have with regards to not only collecting assets, but also being able to provide more responsive, more proactive type environments that people can be able to either, whether it be occupants of a building or within a campus, to be able to really kind of get feedback with regards to a little bit of subsections or certain assets of or aspects of the particular areas that they work within or possibly live in. So pretty much what we've heard is that, especially from the systems integration side, is that really from the manufacturer's perspective, or also from the systems integration perspective, is that the systems integrators really want to be able to provide this robust type solution to where they can be able to have the flexibility to just go in. They already provide the ability to go from integrating with the various different sorts of cameras within a particular facility, within a particular area, and integrate that in with whether it be a visitor management type system, or whether it be some sort of other particular source of identification type system. But however, integration still kind of seems to be a challenge for a lot of integrators. It just seems like there's a disconnect between a lot of the manufacturers out there. And so where we come in is that what we want to do is we want to be able to actually work with directly, not with just the systems integrators, but we want to be able to be the bridge between them as well as the manufacturers, and to really make those tools so that they actually have them available, so that the systems integrators can really feel like they're empowered to be able to really provide a bit more further customizations to what they're trying to accomplish. And so going to the next slide, here is basically an area that we kind of really specialize in with regards to the use of artificial intelligence. From our standpoint, we use it to be able to not only just do certain granular things like image processing, but also to be able to manage the various different sorts of sensors, whether it be intrusion, whether it be camera type sensors, as well as to be able to provide more of an easier workflow with regards to being able to either work with different sorts of camera type partners. So some of our camera partners that we have currently, such as Bosch and Access Control, Access Communications, so we actually provide a front end so that they could be able to basically treat some of these, whether it be cameras or whether it be either some sort of access control process. We kind of treat it as essentially how like a mobile developer would actually treat being able to offer maybe a mobile app on an iPhone, for example. and to really be able to have that flexibility to be able to provide various sorts of customized solutions. And so one of the key areas that we see is the digital twin. So basically what a digital twin is a means of being able to take a digital asset or a digital copy of a physical asset, or it can actually be a business process as well. And so what we kind of leverage is that we build our particular tool set off of this other type of a particular concept, and we actually find that it makes being able to build these configurable customized solutions a bit more flexible and a little bit more easier as regards to kind of having an end-to-end type uh, uh, approach to being able to sort of make these sort of integrated customized solutions. And so here's an example of basically, so this is really just tied in with, for example, with the historical background of PSIM, which is what we feel like with our solution is really more of a couple steps up, and really the current approach to where these types of applications should be going is that, so we have a few different sorts of roles here. So we basically see that we could go from a purely manual role all the way to a role that could be assisted by the digital twin, as well as a way to be able to provide a more flexible way for command and control applications. And so at the bottom here, we have the core pieces of here. So we have the observation, analysis, and of course the actuation piece. So what's actually going to, so how's your command and control applications actually going to, carry out what it needs to do? So going through the next slide. So here, normally, so this is pretty much the essentials of what you would see within your access control system. So for example, going in for now, we have to be able to monitor, or at least if you've noticed, like quite a bit of either retail stores or some other types of smaller businesses, they have makeshift type ways of being able to manage people counting, and to be able to really in a way at least try to attempt to regulate the amount of people that occupy within a certain space. So here, for example, you have of course your access zones, and of course that ties in with your particular points, which could either be your exits or your entrance points. And so pretty much within a digital twin, this whole process could actually be replicated, both not just from the physical device aspect, but also the process as well, in terms of being able to say, okay, we have this ability to sort of recall through the system what the access zones can be able to do, or what they should be able to do with regards to being able to manage how many people could be able to occupy a certain space. So definitely that would definitely come into play within the future. So within the next slide, what we want to be able to do is that we want to be able to expand the mindset. So the mindset of being able to provide different sorts of integrated type customizable solutions, and really it's just based off of just one word, just imagination. So for some reason, I guess really there definitely are challenges with regards to being able to provide fully robust integrated solutions. But really it just really just takes a good team with a good imagination to be able to say, okay, so we now have this new challenge of COVID, and being able to see how we can be able to better be able to make these environments a little bit more well-being sound with regards to the health of the people that are occupying these spaces, in addition to the protection of the assets of the business. So going over to the next slide. So here, so this is a if you've never heard of this protocol, which is actually based off of a of a well-known protocol within the health information systems industry called, it's pronounced FHIR. And, so within this case, we here internally ask the questions ourselves. So obviously, we've worked with solutions to where video management systems are integrated with point of sale systems in certain capacities. And, so we asked the question, and this was actually post-COVID, because we were actually approached by certain local school systems here about being able to integrate some access control solutions with their health information systems. And so here within the next slide, we kind of look at the adoption of this. So this seems to this definitely integrating with a protocol such as FHIR is a new concept. And so this is just basically just the curve that the security industry as a whole, systems integrators, facility managers possibly will kind of have to go through in just regards to being able to really see the value and the additional added value of being able to integrate with these types of health information systems. So over to the next slide. We do have an example here. Obviously, we have a medical device here, but with the FHIR, this FHIR protocol, this particular protocol actually does have the concept of dealing with non-medical devices. So for instance, if you actually wanted to be able to deploy something like this within a visitor management system within a hospital, for example, this concept could also be extended, for example, if you were in a non-medical type setting, to where if you needed an interface, maybe a mobile front-end interface to be able to also assist within regards to being able to go through the flow of being able to test, possibly using thermal cameras to be able to test the occupants coming in. And within that case, if there's a case to where there actually needs to be a process going forward, to maybe you would have to be able to maybe manage particular sets of people that could be symptomatic, that would be the case there. And so next slide here is just really just being able to bring these sort of industry type protocols together. One of them is OSDP, of course, used actually hosted by SIA, and is very integral to with regards to extending the newer use cases within access control. And so if we could be able to integrate what's already out there, we could be able to come up with newer customized solutions that could really help assist with management post-COVID. And from that, I take that over to Elizabeth.
Thank you, Sheldon. So at this time, we're going to pose a few questions to our panelists. We have a few coming into our chat box on the side, but we've also put together a few broad questions to kind of kick off the conversation. So first, how does physical identity access management reduce COVID-19 risk within facilities? We've talked a little bit about that with each presenter, but does anyone have any specific examples?
Sure, I'll be happy to actually share the example. So like I was mentioning, that actually this idea came from our customers. So one of our customers called the next week, where he said, we need to address this issue. We have all these people now, when our workforce is going to come back, essential workers and others, when they come back in, we want to make sure everybody's badge will be activated based on if they're healthy or not. So if they're healthy, only then they will come back in, otherwise they won't be able to. So how we can use the PIAM solution. So that's where the whole activation or deactivation of badges is happening through the technology, because that's where you check all the person's health before you give them the badge. Same way, I think the biggest problem where technology really helps is, imagine you have somebody who is healthy or thinks that the person is healthy but falls sick. Now the person tests positive. The biggest challenge is now in the last X days, where all this person went, which all buildings they have gone to. Imagine you have multiple floors, multiple buildings and all. Who else was there? who have been in the close proximity of this person, who could be exposed. How do you inform them? That's the biggest challenge, and that's where, like I mentioned, I think that's where technology is the only way to address it. It's impossible to address that, personally, and you want to do that in a way where you're also not compromising any privacy. So that's one of the biggest challenges. How do you handle that? Because HR doesn't want to share any sensitive information. So leveraging technology in a way where you address the problem without compromising any privacy.
Great, thank you. We have a question here from an attendee that asks if they're having trouble with getting employees to swipe badges pre-COVID, how do you propose minimizing tailgating or piggybacking as maybe multi-family residential facilities or communities get to work?
Yeah, it's a great question. I was pondering that earlier today. The best processes in the world can often be subverted by humans. So I don't know that there's a great technical answer. Certainly, you could do things that make if you want to invest in additional construction activities, you could do things like a double door or turnstiles. Again, you're the goal is not to use technology to make a foolproof or a fail-safe workforce, but to enhance, getting people to do the right things. So don't have a great answer. The technology is not there to force people to behave a certain way, but it is there to encourage them to do the right things.
Some of the customers they're thinking about leveraging the video management system, where you can see one is the distance between the people, also the duration between the badge swipes to find out that people are maintaining social distance, and also using the video cameras. So one of our customers, they're saying we are going to use flare cameras to check the temperature, but also making sure that people are maintaining social distance. One example.
Yeah, we've partnered with a couple of video surveillance or video camera providers that can alert you when there's multiple people, using a credential, for example.
So here's a question for Jeff. With these new technologies, can you talk about additional people and processes that will be required to support the new technologies that are being designed to keep unauthorized people out of buildings, especially that are COVID-19 related?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what's specific to COVID-19, because it's a spectrum, right? There's a level of trust spectrum where I've got a huge company, I don't know who might be coming through my door. I've got to assume everybody's a bad guy on one end of the spectrum. On the other end of the spectrum, we've got a 5-person office. Everybody knows each other visually, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you're trying to find, where, depending on where you are on that spectrum, how much money do I want to invest in additional people, in additional processes. So I think COVID may have shifted us a little more towards being suspicious of everybody end of the spectrum. So if that's the case, then the obvious answer is, hire, like the story I told, we're going to hire a bunch of additional security guards that we didn't feel like we needed before, but we're going to do that as a way to see if that helps. I suspect that it's going to be a big process of experimentation as people go back to offices. They will try certain protocols, they'll try certain processes. Hopefully they'll use data to let them know what things are working, as I was talking about earlier, and then we'll try something else. So, I hate to call it trial and error, test and repeat. But that there's no, I don't think there's a simple answer. You need exactly this many, new security guards post-COVID. It's again, where are you on that trust spectrum, and how will you know if what you're trying is working?
So we have 2 questions here that I'm going to try and combine, but so with additional processes in place and additional access control measures in place. There may be instances where you have people waiting outside in the cold or in the heat, and also inside the facilities with the use of elevators. You know, considering these solutions, have those considerations been made?
Absolutely. Actually, that's where technology really helps, because if you do it manually, then yes, then it's a challenge because you're manually looking at the things which can be fully automated. But if you are leveraging technology, a lot of the checks can be done proactively. So let's say a visitor is coming to your facility. So all the checking can be done before they actually come to the facility. They didn't have to wait for anything, because they could, let's say when they register to meet with somebody, or let's say you have certain questions for the visitors, those questions could be answered before they even come to the facility. Same way for contractors, let's say there's certain things you want to check, all of that information is already available in the different systems. So that could be in the field glass and other contractor management system. So technology should be doing the heavy lifting, so that the people for the workforce, the things should be totally transparent to them. Ideally, that's how it should work.
Great.
Yeah, I also want to add to that as well. Is that yes? So definitely that would also be a integration with with your scheduling process, for example, right? So so that would also come into play. Before they even get to the facility, of course, and while they're actually there, and also to kind of add to that, since that also kind of spills into a little bit of the request or the hope for the perfect smart building, for example, is that so there are also organizations that are kind of like dealing within that. For instance, we work closely with ASHRAE, that they kind of mandate a little bit of some of these rules with regards to how to be able to sort of configure these systems a little bit to address instances within the case of where we're currently at with COVID. So yes.
I think the other thing is, sorry to interrupt. I forgot to mention one thing. So depending on the industry, like in certain industries, I'll give you an example of utilities, energy companies. They have nuclear power plants. People are already following certain process for safety. When people come into a nuclear power plant, there's certain things you go through. If you just make this as an extension of what is the process already, then it's very simple to implement. But if you're creating a whole new process, then it's very important that you figure out the automation part. You don't want to do those things manually. And that's the experience and learning from the customers who are already implementing. Some of the companies, these are like Fortune 100s, who have already figured out. So rather than, I think, everybody trying to reinvent the wheel, learning from sort of these visionary companies, creative companies who are already on the leading edge.
And I'll talk to the elevator part of that question briefly. It's another example of where are you on that trust spectrum. So one way to limit the number of people in elevators is to put signs up saying no more than 3 people or no more than 2 people in this elevator at any one time. If that works for you, great. If it doesn't work for you, you're in a situation where you're less able to trust people, you can use some access control mechanisms that limit the number of people in a conference room. Those same types of solutions work for elevators as well. You have to swipe on entry, swipe on exit. Obviously, that's a little more cumbersome. It's going to cost you a little more to put in place. But that's another example of what can I adapt? What's the best use of my resources to enforce what I believe to be a safe practice of only X number of people in an elevator. And I'll just say, if you've got your employees waiting in a line to get into the building, that's not going to last very long. People won't stand for that. So that's a signal that you need to try something different, either speeding up the entry process or trying out a different approach.
Thank you. Here we have a question. How can physical identity access management ensure social distancing, and how can it respond in real time to trigger the whistleblower?
I think the best way, so sorry, I'm just taking, because this is what customers are doing today. So some of them are using the duration between the badge swipes. They're saying if you see badge swipes right after each other, like, every 2 seconds, 3 seconds, that means people are not maintaining social distance. Others are using cameras where they want to make sure that people maintain social distance. So I think it depends upon how seriously customers take that. But it's not, I won't say it's very easy, but it's very much doable with technology, the existing technology, because you have all of that information. So this is where you can enforce that. And you can also take real-time action. So for example, if you see that if you want to inform somebody, let's say I'm the one who is not really maintaining it, my manager could be informed that, Jasper is not really taking it very seriously. And these are workflows where you can see, okay, this is what happened. Here is the potential violation. Who do you want to inform? You can configure a very simple workflow. Easy thing to do. It can go to the manager. It can go to HR. These are very simple things to do because these kind of controls already exist in PIAM solutions for different reasons. So one of the reasons, like I was mentioning earlier, is safety. I was giving an example of nuclear power plants. If somebody's training or certification expires, guess what? You're not even allowed to enter those areas, sensitive areas, because people can get hurt, people can, there's so many negative things that can happen. So you want to real-time disable their access real-time. That is how serious those regulations are, because the fines could be in millions of dollars. Same control can be applied to COVID-19. Maybe not that seriously, but obviously it can be applied where you can take immediate action. Let's say if you want to disable somebody's access who's not taking these things seriously, very easy to do.
Yeah, a couple things that maybe have already been mentioned. Certainly, you can configure access control system to only allow a certain number of people into a space, whether that's an entire facility or a conference room.
Yep.
You can make it alarm if you violate that.
Yeah, the great point, Jeff. Actually, that's one of the things customers are doing. When people come back to the facility, how many people should be coming back in? So remember the earlier example also, the potential rush for the elevators and all. So they're doing some kind of like space intelligence. How many people have access to these areas? How many people should have access? So that way you can handle it proactively. Great point.
Yeah, and then even using technology in advance to reserve who's going to be in the office on a certain day. If you know you've got a number of square feet that'll support 30 people, figure out some way to use your access control system to reserve those slots in advance. Yeah,
exactly. Especially like for essential workers. Let's say you are going to a data center, you're going to substation, you're going to, like I was giving example of nuclear power plants, sensitive labs. So there's so many people who could be in that area. So they are trying to figure out. So rather than having 10 people at the same time, there could be like 3 people at a certain time and so on. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We have a question here asking about consideration for ADA compliance. So with larger facilities, is it useful to incorporate technologies for individuals with disabilities?
That's a great question, actually, because that's a good one for us, because we work very closely in the aviation sector. We work with very high-profile airports, and obviously we have done projects with TSA for insider threat and all. So we're very, very aware of that. And this is actually one of the biggest challenges, and you probably see on a daily basis that they have so much risk for them. How do you handle that? So I think that's where what they want to do is a number of things they're trying to do. One is training, certification, making sure that people are trained to how to handle COVID-19. I think everybody's doing that. Secondly, making sure people have access to only the areas where they belong. And one of the customers we found out, they call it access governance. So mostly what happens, I think the problem in the industry so far, nobody paid attention to, is how much access people have that's actually not needed. So, as you know, nobody ever says, can you take my access away? People are always asking for more access, their roles might change. So as a result of that, over a period of people could have tons of access, which is not even needed. So what they did is they're doing access governance. Let's find out who actually really needs access to certain areas, sensitive areas. Guess what they found? In some cases, 70 to 80% of the access that people had was not used in last 1 year or 2 years. So obviously, why would you give somebody access if they have not used it for 1 year or so on? So just reducing that, cleaning up that, reduced lot of risk. So the number of ways they're doing it, but this is just one example that we just came across at a very high profile customer in the aviation sector.
Great, thank you. So with just a few minutes left, and as we wrap things up, I'd like to just have each of our presenters just make some final comments on their best strategies to bring back employees in a controlled, safe, and secure way. If you can leave our audience with one thing to think about, what would that be? And let's start with Jasveer.
Sure. No, thank you very much. So what I feel, based on, again, I'm talking from the experience from our customers, is customers are looking for a holistic approach to security. Let's say I'm assuming that most of the audience is from physical security side. So don't think it's only your problem. You have to work with your HR team. You have to work with your legal team. As I mentioned earlier, the COVID-19 Action Committee has multiple stakeholders. So you should think about a holistic approach. How can we solve this problem in collaboration with our HR team, with our legal team, and in a way where you show value to the top executives. In many cases, I personally have talked to a number of CSOs who feel that security is sort of seen as like a cost center, necessary evil. You really don't see value. I think this is your opportunity. So COVID-19 is your opportunity to show how much value you bring to the organization, how much value you bring to the safety of your workforce, and how you really improve their experience. So in my view, if I'm in your shoes, I could, COVID-19, yes, it's a sad thing, but this could be a catalyst for you to really change the way you think about security, change the way your leadership thinks about security, where your CEO, your CFO, all the top level executives feel proud of you, that, you are really making a difference, because it can also be, in addition to saving lives, it's sort of an emotionally rewarding thing. How do you really make the world a safer place? So I think it's a great opportunity for all of us to contribute.
Great, thank you. Jeff?
Yeah, I'll just say, think about that intersection of humans and technology, and test and iterate. There's no perfect solution. People are funny creatures. A lot of people want to do the right things. Hopefully the majority of people want to do the right thing. How can you use technology to support that and to protect against those few that don't? And what's the right balance there? Test different things, try different things, iterate.
Great, thank you so much. And Sheldon?
Yes, I would definitely just say that it really just boils down to the thought leaders, as well as some of the implementers in terms of like their imagination and with regards to how they approach this unique problem. So for instance, so if there could be a way for an integrator to say maybe provide some sort of feedback mobile app that says, okay, if they could be able to ensure that an area maybe has been properly sterilized and properly cleaned for the building occupants, that'd be awesome. So that would be, just one particular case of just being able to make sure you coordinate with the right groups, right business divisions, and make something that would be of beneficial use with regards to not just the assets protection, but the overall health and well-being with the environment a little bit acceptable and palatable to use.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for everyone for attending today. We will be sharing the link to this recording, and it'll be made available on the SIA website. So thank you all very much. Have a great day.
Thank you, Ellie. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Sheldon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.